Hexagram number 54. The marrying maiden. Wanting empowers evil. The image of the marrying maiden, a woman who marries on the basis of desire, symbolizes one who either through choice or circumstance finds himself in a position of little influence. The persons with whom he must deal pay him too little regard and seem not to notice or care about him. There seems to be no adequate way to deal with the situation. He is tempted to give up. Each time we face a problem of this sort, three choices appear, allowing things to work out, forcing advance, or abandoning the problem altogether. If we allow matters to work out, we learn to influence through the power of inner truth. We further strengthen our personality by maintaining our inner independence and self-esteem while under the pressures of adversity. If we force matters, we abandon the way of the sage and compromise our self-esteem. Our victory is both hollow and temporary, for we achieve only conformity rather than the change of heart and willing adherence we really seek. While it is not always wrong to abandon a problem, allowing the Ching to guide us through it gives us an opportunity to gain rich new insights into human relationships and into the way of the sage. The counsel given by this hexagram is contained chiefly in the lines that point out the problems that come from wanting. Wanting causes us to lose our inner independence. Others immediately understand this on an inner level and tend to exploit it, much as one holds candy before a child to get it to behave as desired. If, however, we maintain our inner independence, we influence others without any loss of self, for people also intuitively recognize and respect those who have inner independence. Firm inner principles and no need for their recognition. The first seeds of wanting arise when we doubt that we have any influence on the situation, or when we begin to fear that things in themselves will not work out correctly. We begin to strive to be understood, or to force events to proceed straight toward the goal. Desire also operates when we want to be seen in a certain way or to be understood. We are so intent on having an influence that we overlook whether the one we want to influence is correct in relating to us. Ambition thus causes us to lose not only our integrity, but our powers of observation. Indeed, many of the social and work situations of our time are designed to unbalance us. A subtle king of the heap game goes on causing others who are envious of our inner independence to challenge us. They may find some way to force us to fulfill an unreasonable demand, hoping to make us angry and therefore question our values. Once doubt takes hold, we will seek ways to improve the situation and thus enter the king of the heap game. The first device of control is to make us doubt ourselves. If we begin to play their game, either by attempting to combat the situation or by accepting their way of manipulating, the evil is only multiplied. This need not happen if we learn to relate correctly to situations that threaten to unbalance us with desires, or that otherwise make us doubt ourselves. The correct response is to remain neutral and persevering. In addition to betraying our inner dignity, wanting leads to unreasonable assessments of what can be accomplished, so that we expose ourselves to failure. For example, wanting may lead us to fanciful risks in buying stocks, in playing the lottery, or in getting ahead. Wanting too much from others also really leads to unreasonable expectations, causing them to rebel. These failures arouse our pride, further complicating matters. Even being ambitious about self-development leads to disappointment. It is as if the ego, seeing that we are determined to correct ourselves, joins the effort. Characteristically, it believes that in all-out effort will win the day. Envisioning itself as a white knight in shining armor. With each self-sacrifice, it watches to see if gains are being made. Its participation is always conditional, hesitant, and glory-seeking. Nothing of enduring value can be achieved by our ego. Undertakings bring misfortune. Nothing that would further. The marriage discussed in Marrying Maiden is that of the concubine. And in influence, Hexagram 31, affection is aroused when we sense another's kindness, sincerity, and humility. In the family, Hexagram 37, chaste conduct is specified as the father's role, while the mother's is to nourish the family correctly. In duration, Hexagram 32, the goal is to create an adequate basis for relationships so that they will endure. This is possible when people are steadfast in their way of life and in their individual loyalty to the truth. In development, Hexagram 53, marriage finds its full expression through continuous organic growth, the slow maturing and endurance of a single relationship as it passes through challenge and change. The marriage of the concubine, while it is based on affection, is problematical because of desire. As a situation, it implies that we should allow relationships to develop to sufficient maturity before we commit ourselves to them. For if they are to endure and be harmonious, they must be founded on correct and enduring values. To proceed without having established the correct foundation is to put ourselves in the position of a concubine. We proceed when we open ourselves in confidence, give ourselves freely, commit our loyalty and trust to another, or merely want to do so. The above principles are demonstrated in the lines. In the first line, the maiden becomes a concubine because she has not waded through the correct steps. She has rushed into a relationship, seeking happiness as a thing in itself, without regard to the fundamentals that create it. She gives herself lightly and easily. As a consequence, she must accept having only the influence on her husband that kindliness secures. The third line pictures a woman who wants the joys of marriage so much that she accepts the position of a concubine and thus compromises her self-esteem. In the fourth line, she is willing to wait past the customary time to obtain proper marriage because she resists being controlled by her desires and holds to what is correct. She finds happiness though belatedly. If we draw others to us for the right reasons, we will have no need to suffer. Only when we are strict in maintaining our values and inner independence will others take the care to relate to us correctly. In assessing our relationships with others, it is essential to ask, are they open and sensitive to us, or guarded and closed? We should also ask whether we are likewise open-minded, whether we imprison them in doubt or retain hurdles they must surmount to assuage our pride. Assuage our pride. This hexagram indicates the correct procedure, whether we are looking for a job or a mate, beginning a business relationship, or buying or selling something. The person who controls his desires and puts the fundamental considerations of just and correct conduct above all else will not end in being a slave to anyone or anything. His relationships will be free of the troubles and annoyances that plague easy relationships. The hexagram also indicates the correct behavior to follow once we find ourselves in a secondary position. The image presented is that of being a friend to a powerful person. Although we have no real power, we are able to have an influence through tact and kindliness. Above all, we should chivalrously endure those who do not follow our values. Changing line number 1. The marrying maiden as a concubine. We, in a position of limited influence and lack of any power to change the unfavorable situation. We are hampered when we are emotionally affected through not being able to deal with the difficulties of the situation. Even though we have little influence, we must not compete with whoever or whatever has more influence, but accept the fact that kindliness is the only constructive way of relating at the moment. We must not, as second wives, compete with or supplement first wife. If because of wounded pride we structure how they must change, we put a negative pressure on the situation, whereas if we require only what is essential and correct, and if we let go and trust the unknown, help will come. The situation is like being tied to someone who has an addiction. We must not attempt to deal with the addiction directly or compete with it for influence, but concentrate on keeping our attitude correct. Changing line number 2. A one-eyed man is able to see although there is nothing on the surface that tells us of greatness, and although there is no quality of trustworthiness on which we can rely, if with our inner eye we can faithfully hold to the image of what another person can be and to his potential to rescue those qualities within himself that would make him reliable and faithful, then we will have a creative effect. This is what it means to be one-eyed yet able to see. The great man may be an image of him when he is humble. We cling to this image of remembering that he has it within himself to be humble, even though all that is externally visible is to the contrary. Beyond clinging to this, we abandon the inferiors that control him. I'm going to read that again. Beyond clinging to this, we abandon the inferiors that control him and persevere in loneliness. The I Ching mentions love only in the family. In relation to the father who does nothing to make himself feared, love governs their intercourse. Love, thus defined, means faithfully clinging to what is right, though in this case it be at the cost of being lonely and misunderstood. Our sacrifice of self-interest and self-importance supports the great man in others. Again, our sacrifice of self-interest and self-importance supports the great man in others. Being faithful also refers to clinging to the inner truth of the matter, regardless of the outward appearances of things. Changing line number 3. The marrying maiden as a slave. If we allow desire or comfort, wanting something that is not yet worth having, accepting unity at the expense of principle, who can we blame for having lost our self-esteem? We cannot shortcut the true path to take happiness before the time is right. Fate endows him who wants and wrestles with him who takes. The question is that of being enslaved to our own ego, with its demands to be recognized or seen in a certain way, and its insistence on occupying the central place of influence. So long as we continue wishing to return to the way things were, to the luxury of old self-indulgent relationships which through unstated contracts we flatter someone else's ego in exchange for their flattering ours. The ego continues to rule, and we remain blind to the disastrous loss of self-esteem thus incurred. If we find that in any situation, if we find that in any such manner we have compromised ourselves, we should accept the mistake and go on. We compound the difficulty if we give way to pride and humiliation by adopting a hard or vindictive attitude. Rescuing ourselves does not mean that we cast others into oblivion because we deem them hopeless. Changing line number 4. The marrying maiden draws out the allotted time. By waiting past what would seem to be a reasonable time for difficult situations to clear up, we avoid throwing ourselves away and thus retain inner peace and self-respect. One day the situation will clear up. Meanwhile, we should avoid wanting what is not ready. Just as we would not want to eat green apples, we do find ourselves engaged in wanting. When we do find ourselves engaged in wanting, we should ask why we want something that is not worth having. We need to recognize the spoiled baby within who would jeopardize self-esteem to obtain a cheap facsimile of joy. The hidden price of which is suffering. Changing line number 5. The embroidered garments were not as gorgeous as those of the serving maid. Although the princess marries beneath her station, she accepts the situation with grace. Each of us is on the same spiritual path, some ahead, some behind. In occupying a position of advantage, we should be free of vanity and arrogance. In occupying a secondary position, we should be free of envy. If we are misunderstood, we should not strive to let people know our inner thoughts. We should simply adapt to the unfavorable situation with grace. If the way ahead is still unclear, we should search our heart and mind for elements of vanity, self-importance, pride, forgive me, I don't know this word. Condescension. Condescension. Forgive me. I'm going to read this over. If the way ahead if the way ahead is still unclear, we should search our heart and mind for elements of vanity, self-importance, pride, and condensate. I'm gonna skip that word. I know I got it right, but forgive me. Or obstinacy that may yet block the path or influence the way we react to the situation. Another meaning of this line is that we do not choose our ultimate mates or the time which estrangements will end, nor are we able to consciously choose the winning combinations or solve our fundamental problems. The sage, here referred to as emperor, does. He takes the initiative, and we only need to wait and not throw ourselves away. The time will mature all the faster if we are patient. Okay, condescension. I can't resist. I must go back to that. Condescension. I just have not seen that enough. If the way ahead is still unclear, we should search our heart and mind for elements of vanity, self-importance, pride, and condescension. Oh, forgive me. So we ended. We're gonna end changing line 5 right there. Again, I'll just read the final sentences. He takes the initiative, and we only need to wait and not throw ourselves away. The time will mature all the faster if we are patient. Changing line number 6. Nothing that acts to further. Outwardly, we do the right things, but inwardly, we still desire to indulge comfort, vindictiveness, or anger at having to wait the allotted time. We resist the way the cosmos works. We cannot return to the old ways of self-indulgence, nor even long nostalgically for the past. Success will begin when we are ready to leave behind, once and for all desire as a basis for relationships. This is the meaning of the true sacrifice required by this line. Regardless of the extent to which we act our childish self, if we still look forward to a goal in which we return to lost comforts, it is as if we observe all the forms of correctness, but do not correct the heart of the matter. We need to relinquish the childish heart with its desires. Rescue means that whether we gain or lose what our childish heart wants, we manage to cling to another's potential, to be humble and high-minded. This is what the sage does for us. It is true love that gives space, that waits patiently, that perseveres without regard to self and reward, and that has nothing to do with surface manifestations, displays of affection, statements of love or possession. Selfless love invisibly sustains another and pulls him toward the good within himself. It is a love whose only reward is privately to oneself. In maintaining it, we are at peace. A real sacrifice occurs when, at the heights of difficulties, we remain resolute and determined to go on with the work of purifying ourselves. Without this determination and humility, nothing acts to further. This ends Hexagram 54.